Hi. Let me just see if this is working. Okay, great. Hi, Dolores. So, just one more time for the recording. Let me introduce this one more time. This is 5 Days of Destiny. And today we'll be talking about alienation, belonging, and sacred activism. And the reason I was thinking about alienation, first of all, as we mentioned a little bit last week, the archetype of Aquarius has to do with the collective, right? So we think of Aquarius oftentimes when we think of groups of people, our network, networking, friends, even causes, things like that, causes we belong to. I also like to think of it as like the audience. And when we also look at what could the shadow side be for this, the symbolism, one of the things that really seems to come through a lot when someone's having a difficult, or if someone has strong Aquarian signatures, is a sense of alienation. Now, we tend to think of Aquarians as being very unique and original, and they just relish in that being different. But that can also mask a sense of not belonging, a sense of being so different and not being able to connect with others, not being able to find a way to really sort of connect on a heart level or understand where others are coming from. And oftentimes that can lead us even more and more alienated and more isolated. I mean, this is a time when, like never before, we can connect with people, so many people all around the world, any time of day or night. But are those connections deep, and are they meaningful? And they can oftentimes give us a sense of, who can we really depend on and feel like is there for us, and where we feel like we belong and where we are accepted. And so as the South Node right now is in, has been in Aquarius ever since about May of last year, we are, we'll see a lot, we have been seeing a lot of need to deal with that shadow side, the shadow side of not belonging. I mean, you never know what's going on in people's minds, but, we couldn't not recognize that when Mars was conjunct the South Node recently, we had two major celebrity suicides, Kate Spade and Anthony Bourdain, people who seem to have it all, right? Who seem to be admired. And for whatever reason, I don't want to make too many assumptions, but we can just assume that all their success wasn't enough, right? The admiration and all the fans and all the fame, that doesn't fulfill one on a soul level. And I said this actually when I was doing my webinar on what this transit of North Node in Leo, South Node in Aquarius would be like. And I really felt like it was the dark side of fame, because almost anyone can be famous right now with a YouTube channel or Facebook page or Instagram or whatever else the kids are using out there. And with that comes a responsibility, and people project on you. And then, people can build you up to also want to then tear you down, because we're always projecting about, the parents onto everyone, so we put people up on a pedestal. That's very much a Leo kind of quality. And then we can tear them down. We can alienate them and make them feel less than if they don't live up to our expectations. And I really, I think it's really worth contemplating, because we always assume that, fame isn't something that is worth really thinking about on a deep spiritual level. But actually, now that, everyone can have their 15 minutes of fame. I was at a bookstore not long ago, and there was a book on the just on the shelf for anybody, that said, so you've been publicly shamed, what to do, you know, a manual on what to do if you've been publicly shamed. Because now that everyone can have fame, then everyone can have shame too, in a public way. Everything is public, it's out there. And that is very much the Leo Aquarius axis. You know, we think of, you know, the Leo's the star in the spotlight, but it can also be arrogance and brashness, and someone that thinks that they're entitled to being special. And the opposite end, Aquarius, it tends to be the opposite of that, detached, giving one's identity and needs and desires up for the collective good, that kind of thing. But then it can also, you know, we can have this polarity, this difficulty relating with these signs. And now with the North Node being in Leo, there's this growth opportunity there. And maybe the South Node in Aquarius can fuel that. For instance, if one has a purpose that's greater than them, then they can step into their Leo nature and shine in order to fulfill something that's greater than themselves, because we are all looking for inspiring leaders. But, you know, again, at the looking at that and how it's playing out in life, that there are so many people that are on, you know, YouTube and whatever, that are suddenly thought leaders. And we have to be careful of disturbing messages that maybe can lead to destructive behavior or destructive ideas. Just because someone is charismatic, you know, that doesn't mean that they're leading people in the right direction. And who's to say what that is? I mean, we have to be wary of it ourselves, of what direction we're going to. So in this eclipse that's coming up, well, it's not till the August eclipse really that we're going to see the Aquarian eclipse, August 11th. And that's going to be the last, I think, in a series. I think there might be one more next year on this Leo Aquarius axis, but the Leo Aquarius eclipses that have been happening since last year are wrapping up. But we're still seeing a lot happening on this axis, you know, because as the lessons of the Leo Aquarius axis have been, you know, we've been given them the past year or so, we really want to start to look deeply at what this means in our lives. So looking at your Leo and Aquarius houses, if you know your houses in your chart, you know, what does that mean for you and your personal experience of life? The other thing that is really significant about Leo and Aquarius is they're fixed signs. And so this is a time when the change that needs to happen can be really challenging, because if anything that we need to let go of is usually in an area where we don't really want to let go of, where we could probably be very sure of ourselves. And the growth that needs to happen can also be something we resist. Maybe we're too proud to grow in a certain area. That's Leo, you know, the Leo pride, not wanting to lose face or what have you. And, but the important thing to know is this is a time where something very significant can be crystallizing within us. I did a webinar on just before, or just as the nodes were shifting into these signs, called Shifting the Collective Destiny. I'll put a link below here if anybody's interested in watching that. And you know, and a lot of what I'd said then, I think is very clear now. And I'll go over a couple of things too, because when something is crystallizing within us, something has been over this past year or so, since, you know, we've been experiencing the nodal transit in these signs. What crystallizes within us now is something that could possibly last and carry us through the rest of our lives even. And I'll be looking at an example here in a moment. But let me just see who is joining me here. Hi, Maria from Portugal. Hi, Desiree. And let's see. Thank you so much for joining me. Okay, so I'm going to see if I can share my screen here because I want to show you a couple of things. Hold on one second. So for those of you that do know some astrology and you know can look at a chart and have a sense of what that might mean, let me close all this. And this is an example I used from my my webinar on shifting the collective destiny. I used the example of Rosa Parks. Okay, so speaking of sacred activism, I mean, she is considered the grandmother of the civil rights movement in the United States in the 60s. But it was back in 1943 when, you know, you can see here the nodal transit. The North Node was in Leo, the South Node was in Aquarius. And this was the date, December 1st, 1943, where Rosa Parks walked into the NAACP, the National Association for Colored People, I think is what it stands for. And she joined the NAACP and was a member, an activist, for the rest of her life. She died in 2005. So that's like 62 years. And what had happened was that shortly before that day, you know, she was about to board a bus, and the bus driver said colored people couldn't come in through the front. She needed to go in the back. So she went out the front, and she was waiting to go out the back, and he drove off without her, leaving her in the rain. And she was so humiliated and so angry. And we don't know what she may have said to herself. But looking at the South Node on her was exactly on her natal Mercury, you know, our communication. And the South Node tends to drain the planet that it's on at times, you know, or it can, there's something from the past coming through. And so she likely, I mean, my sense, one symbolism is maybe she felt like her voice alone wasn't strong enough. What could she as one person do? And Aquarius is, again, it's a sign of the collective, of ideas and movements that are bigger than us as individuals. And with the North Node and Pluto, on that day, the North Node was exactly conjunct transiting Pluto in Leo. And to me, this says maybe she felt that she would be much more empowered, Pluto in Leo generation, by giving her voice to something greater than herself, to a movement greater than herself, and with other people that shared the same view. And then it was, let me see if I can get to the next slide. Okay. And then in 1955 is when she was on that bus, where that same bus driver from 1943, from 12 years before, had told her to give up her seat for a white man, and she refused. Okay, and so by that time, she was a seasoned activist. She knew what her rights were. She was not afraid to stand up for them. And that became the linchpin moment of the American Civil Rights movement. So this is 12 years, you know, there's been a lot of stories around what happened that day when she wouldn't give up her seat. And the stories were that, oh, she was too tired. She'd been a seamstress all day and she was exhausted and she wouldn't give up. Well, there's a quote from Rosa Parks later that said the only thing she was tired of was being disrespected or something like that. Like, she was not tired. And we'll never know because we don't know exactly what happened, but all we do know that she had been a member of the NAACP for 12 years at that point. She knew her rights. And at the time, transiting Uranus was exactly opposite her Uranus Mercury. She was having her Uranus opposition. Those of you who know about the Uranus opposition is our midlife crisis transit that happens in the early 40s. I just did a podcast on that with Gray Crawford, and there's that axis again about Leo Aquarius. Leo is that bold action, being bold, stepping outside of yourself, and when it's well integrated with Aquarius, it's doing so for a higher cause greater than yourself. I just want to go back. This is part of that webinar that I had told you about. You can look at the recording. But you see, by that time, she knew in activism, which I'm learning about now, if it's not photographed or recorded, it didn't happen. You can't prove injustice or anything, unfortunately, unless you have, a photograph or something. So there was a photographer that took her picture. I don't know the story around, if that was planned or whatever, but she knew her rights. She knew that she had to stand up, and she wasn't the first person to ever not give up her seat, right? But she wanted to make sure this made it to the newspaper. And so, that is what this potential of this Leo Aquarius axis can show us. Being bold, getting outside of yourself because you are driven by something that's greater than yourself. And that's something, we probably have a sense of already, but when you look at the symbolism and how clear it can be right now. And the other thing is, what she inspired the 1961 Freedom Riders. And these were average, ordinary people who probably never saw themselves as activists that suddenly were touched, moved, and inspired to make a difference. And they all got arrested. And I'm sure it was a really challenging experience, but that's how change is made. And so when we think about the concept of sacred activism, bringing the sacred into our lives is something that we can do consciously at any moment. And we need to really contemplate what it means, what is sacred in our lives. And it can really help us to align with the fact that in those times where we want to give up or we want to give into despair, we see where all this is going and it's not looking good. If we give up, if we give into despair, we're letting down a lot of people who are in a much worse situation than we are. And so we kind of have a responsibility to take care of ourselves, to fuel our fire, to take time off when we need it, and really to stoke our own flame when it comes to what we're passionate about. And we also have to be careful about where we choose to give our time and energy and our voice to. I don't know how many of you have seen that show Westworld that's on right now. And there was in season 1, this guy's going through this whole game. He wants to find whatever's the treasure at the end of the game. And he keeps being told, this game isn't meant for you. And to me, that's really significant because sometimes there can be something that maybe sounds like it's super important and it's, everyone's got to believe in this and we've all got to step in to a place to help out people that are disadvantaged. But you really need to check in with yourself because we are each on our own karmic path. And if something isn't meant for you, then it's not meant for you. And I just say that because we can't do everything, right? You can do anything, but you can't do everything. And sometimes when there's a fight that's not ours to fight, we'll be given that message. And I say this in terms of, there's a lot of really well-meaning white people, for instance, that really want to help out and be good allies to people of color. And first you need to figure out what that means before we start thinking we can help and then end up maybe making the situation worse. I know I even had a situation where I was helping out children in need, but it just felt like something was missing there where it was not my calling, right? Even if it was something that was needed. When you find your own calling and you realize I'm meant to help this people in this way, then that is where we can feel we can give more of ourselves. And, you know, right now there's more is called on for all of us because there is a lot that needs our assistance, whether it's monetarily, time, talent, whatever. You know, what is your form of activism? That's what is so important to figure out. Some people, it's making art. It's making art to either speak out, to inspire, maybe to shame those who who are not, you know, living up to their duties for our society, or whatever it is, and however it's meant to come out. And I know some really talented therapists and coaches and counselors who say their form of activist is not to be on Facebook speaking out about things. Their form of activism is to help those who are breaking down, to help those who are falling apart. I know one of my therapists actually refuses to go on Facebook to say anything political because she said that she that way she would be just adding to more of the anxiety, and she sees people every day breaking down from it, right? So we also want to just keep in mind, we don't want to you know, we don't want to blame and shame all those people who maybe aren't speaking out enough because maybe there is a good reason. With activism, I was recently on a call with moveon.org, and there was a woman who had been involved in some successful activist movements in Europe that said what they found was the most successful activist movement is when it's an ecology of activism. And an ecology is where there's people doing their specific special thing, what they care about, and then all of these little, you know, organisms kind of connect and share and can help each other, but you stay where you are meant to give the most you can give. So just think about what's your part in the ecology. If we're spreading ourselves too thin and trying to do everything, then that can be a way of where we burn out. That's when we check back in with ourselves and what is my path? What is my purpose? At this very time in my life and in history. Let me see. I'm going to just check in. We've got Tessa from Switzerland, Kine from Norway, sorry. Hi, Diane and Wendy. Thank you so much. Oh, Wendy, your South Node is currently on your Ascendant. That's interesting. So that would mean that the North Node is on your Descendant, right? So there can maybe be some lessons there around what you may need when it comes to partnerships. But we can get more into that in a bit. So let me see. I'll go back to when we're talking about sacred activism. So what is being an activist? I mean, these days, anyone can call themselves an activist. I mean, we are all essentially, if we care about our world and we want to make a difference, you know, we can be an activist. It's not something we have to claim that, oh, I'm an activist, you know, declare that we are activists. Just do it, right? Whatever it is you can do it. Stay connected to people. Bring the sacredness into it. You know, if we let all the anger and rage and disempowerment eat us from the inside, we cannot give our best when it comes to our purpose around activism. So let's see. Let me go back to the eclipses. Now, the reason we look so much at eclipses for the sense of destiny is, as I said, the lunar nodes, the nodes of destiny. And today, Mercury is conjunct the North Lunar Node in Leo. You know, so that is about getting the message, sharing the message. And with Leo, if it comes from the heart, if it's about love, if it's about what the love that you want to share, today can be a really great day for that. Leo is bold. Leo is confident. So see if you can align with that message for yourself today. Now, let me see. Let me look at my notes. Oh, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Bhagavad Gita. Now, I'm not an expert in the Bhagavad Gita either, but because this is a time of us following our dharma, dealing with karma, finding our destiny, the Bhagavad Gita is an ancient text that is very much around this idea of following your dharma. That is that sacred path that you're meant to fulfill in this lifetime. Firstly, I highly recommend Adam Ellenboss from Nightlight Astrology. He is doing a series called the Bhagavad Gita for astrologers. I think today is the last one. There was like 3, and today is like the last opportunity to watch the webinar. But he's got the recordings, and I highly recommend it. He has an expert guest on the Bhagavad Gita, because it is kind of hard to understand if you're just like reading it yourself. And I've been struggling with it for years, or just kind of exploring it. And then Adam brings it back to astrology. I'll leave his name down in the comments for those that don't know him, because I think you just have to look at his his Facebook page to get the details. But anyway, the one thing that really struck me about the Bhagavad Gita, I mean, it's all of this stuff that we contemplate so much with astrology, especially evolutionary astrology. What is my purpose? What am I meant to do? What's the one thing, But it's something that, even if you do know where your North Node is and your North Node ruler and how it's aspected, you still have to actually get in action. You still have to say yes to your destiny and make all the decisions around that can help you along that path where you're actually walking the path. And the Bhagavad Gita has all kinds of insight around finding your dharma and following it. The one thing that really struck me was when the main character Arjuna has to go into battle. And on the other side, like the enemy, there were many of his family members. And he had said, no way, I can't go into battle, because what if I end up killing one of my family members? Isn't that, totally blasphemous? And he was, given the insight that actually, and I actually had asked this expert on Bhagavad Gita if I understood it right. And it actually is that according to this particular spiritual teaching, your dharma is more important to fulfill than any kind of familial connection or anything like that, because you're here to fulfill a dharma, a sacred duty. Now, again, I'm not saying this is the only truth out there. We may resonate with it differently, but that does definitely seem to be relevant now, because, not all of us believe the same things as our family members, or our parents, or maybe our children. And that can be really challenging. But at the end of the day, we need to check in with ourselves. What is true for us? What is really morally right in our eyes? And it may be different than those of our loved ones, or those people that we feel a duty to, our family or in-laws or whatever. And it doesn't mean, I'm not saying you have to go into battle with them, but that's what it can feel like. Because now is not a time to just say, oh yes, everything's okay and we're fine in the world, because obviously things are calling for great change. And that means even more understanding what truth is from our point of view. And I'm not here to tell anyone, what's true and what's not true about the world and what to believe. But when we look at what is my own path? We each have a unique path. I can't really express that enough. That is the teaching of evolutionary astrology. That is the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita, that we have to be true to our path. And sometimes our form of sacred activism can simply be raising children who are kind and who are able to care for themselves in the world, or whatever it is. Really checking in with, what am I here to do right now? What can I do now at this stage in my life? And I fully believe that. I think we waste so much time when we're shaming people into what they should be doing. There is a time when we have to have a battle cry, and we want to wake everyone else up, but we can frustrate ourselves if we're just crying for battle and not actually taking steps to make change in the world. So what is the ecology of activism, and where is your place in it? Those of you who are interested in activism in America, I think moveon.org is an amazing group. If you, every Sunday, they have a call on practical steps you can do to make change in the world. And let me see if there's any questions around this. People have a lot of questions around their North Node. Let's see, transiting North Node on my North Node Mars. Oh, compulsory activism. I don't like the word compulsory in anything, really, when it comes to astrology. I don't know. That's just me. This question comes from Kine. I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name right. In your 12th house. When we look at North Node conjunct Mars, okay, so Mars is our drive. I wonder what sign that is that you're saying that's in Kine, because that would also make a difference. But I don't know, that's like a militant movement forward, right? So maybe you feel compulsive about moving forward in life. If it's in, okay, oh, that's right. The transiting North Node is on your North Node, so it's in Leo. I wouldn't say it's compulsory activism. I think what's compulsory is that you find a way for you to shine, for you to live your special destiny. Leo is about having a special destiny. I would look at where your sun is. That rules Leo and that North Node. And what is really essential about the North Node the North Node in Leo, South Node in Aquarius, is the South Node in Aquarius. Perhaps you came into this life giving up of your own identity and your specialness to another cause that's greater than you. This life, it's time for you to own and claim your specialness and be driven in that. And so, you can still be an activist. I mean, some people would say, oh, you were an activist in a past life, so you're not to do that now. Now you're supposed to just joy and have fun. I don't believe it works that way. I think we need to balance our South Node and our North Node energies. I think that, who had like Gandhi had North Node in Leo, South Node in Aquarius, if I am remembering that right. And he was mute in the beginning of his life. He was very, very shy. And it wasn't until he saw injustices that really moved him. And he knew that he actually had a gift of words, that he found his way out of his shyness and knew that if he could shine, then that would make a difference for those who are a lot, underprivileged, and people were experiencing racism. And so, yes, with Saturn on the South Node, a planet like Saturn can keep you feeling this heavy responsibility to the past. So with that Saturn-Mars opposition, you may need to find your will and your drive to shine, to grow. And that being in the 6th house is about meaningful work. finding work that actually is meaningful, service that's meaningful. And also with the, South Node in the 12th house, try not to get stuck in all the grief and the overwhelm of everything that's wrong in the world. Let that connection to the divine, to your spiritual, whatever your sort of spiritual path is, let that fuel your work, bring more meaning into your work. So getting in action and actually doing things on a daily basis. The 6 houses are, health and, well, it is health, but it's daily habits. Letting those daily habits and the daily work you're doing be infused with meaning and with purpose. Let's see. Now, I'm not going to answer everybody's questions about the nodes today. Tomorrow, we're going to talk a little bit more about the nodes. So let's see, what's tomorrow's talk on? It is let's see if I could get it exactly right. Tomorrow's Wednesday. It's Independence Day in America. But I still hope you'll join me. We'll be talking about your North Node and eclipse destiny. So get here tomorrow on time, because remember, my little videos are only going to be 30 minutes each. Look up your North Node and see where it is in your chart. Now remember, we want to also look up our North Node and South Node, because they are an axis of balance. But those of you that are new to this, we can just look up the North Node. Look up the North Node and have it ready for me so that we can talk about it a little bit. Let me just share my screen a little bit for those of you who don't know your chart yet and you still want to kind of figure out where your North Node is. Go to this is just an easy, free way you can do it. You go to planetwatcher.com. Online, it's free. Put in your birth date. Say you were born July 3rd, like 1965 or something. And it will show you your chart if you don't already have it. And then you want to look at this little North Node here, glyph. I don't know what else it looks like. It just looks like a North Node to me. And look at what sign it's in, right? And then your South Node will be the opposite sign. But just see, where is your North Node? And those of you who know your North Node, you'll want to know what your North Node ruler is, because that tells you even more of the story. So say for Gemini, the North Node ruler would be Mercury. And we can talk a little bit about that tomorrow. Because let me just stop sharing my screen again. I don't know how to do that. There we go. So when we look at our nodes of destiny, no matter where they are, during eclipses, we'll want to see how do they relate to the current transit of the eclipses, right? So how does your North Node relate to the current transiting nodes now, which are in Leo and Aquarius? Because as these lunar node signatures become even more lit, basically illuminated by the eclipses, then we all want to look at what is my sort of role in this unfolding of this energy happening right now. I find it very interesting because my nodes are square to the transiting nodes right now. And that square can really just add it can be frustrating, but it really feels like a sense of growth if I can just get out of my own way, right? So those of you who have nodes in Scorpio, Taurus have really been challenged in this way as well, because they're square. All of us in those fixed signs, right? We need to get a little bit out of our fixedness, because there's some real growth opportunities here for us. And we'll talk about that more tomorrow. So our time is up for today. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you can contemplate more about what your Dharma is yourself, and how you can make activism more sacred in your life. And that comes from, again, knowing exactly what it is you're here to give and how you can give your best in the most beautiful, sacred, and heart-fulfilled way. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you tomorrow at the same time, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. And until then, take care and look up your North Nodes. All right. Bye.